How's it? Welcome along to Bez's Garage. We were into the reassembly of this 31 cubic inch single briggs and strap motor. So everything's been cleaned up and we're basically ready to go back to putting it back together again. So it's all looking nice and shiny and good. Now, first thing you need to do is this seal here. If you've got a new seal, put a new seal in it. We don't have a new seal, this wasn't leaking. So what you do is you get yourself a bit of the old Vaseline, good stuff like that, and put a little bit of Vaseline around inside the seal. That just means that when it comes in, it's going to seal nicely. It's also not going to catch when you put the crankshaft through, and won't catch and bind when you start it up for the first time. Right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to flip this over. Okay, we'll sit it somewhere here. Now, you may remember we had the crankshaft from last time. We assembled it all up and we're going to put it all together. So what you do when you're doing your final assembly, I use something like this, which is a Lucas oil stabilizer, and I tend to assemble it with this. I make sure that I've got plenty of this on here. It sticks in there for the first startup, so you're not too worried about not running out of lubrication. So we'll give that a lube, put some inside the bearing here as well, just to make sure that it's lubed up as we can get. We'll also need to put a bit on the wrist pin here. And that's, okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble this, lower this down, and hopefully we can put this together in one point, remembering that the flywheel side is down and the outside, the upside is where the crank goes into. So I'm going to put this down in here, all going well. We should be able to line everything up nicely and give it a bit of a jiggle and a spin, and if you hold your mouth right, here we go. So now that's in, now as I've said many a time before, make sure at every stage that everything moves nicely. So we've got that together, it's already moving nicely. So the next thing we have to do, we need to look at putting the piston in. So the piston we've cleaned up already, it's all cleaned up, ready to go back in again. We've cleaned out the ring lands, everything's nice and shiny. We'll take the bolts out of here. So what we need to do to put this in is we need to collapse the rings. So put that on there. Now you see there's only one way it can go, it's got to go on like that. So we're going to collapse the rings with a ring compressor, and then we're going to push the whole thing into here. Now the other thing to remember is where this little mark on the piston is, that goes towards the flywheel. So on this motor, that's going to go down and it's going to be on the same size as the flywheel. So what we do is we get a ring compressor, which looks a little bit like this. And then we put a bit of oil in here to make sure that it's nicely lubed up. All right. And then we're going to get the piston, and we're going to put a bit of lube on this as well, because we want this to slide in to the bore nicely. And then we're going to open this up, put that into there. Now you also need to make sure that where these openings for the rings are, so we need to make sure that this is sitting correctly, and we need to make sure that these are actually opposite. So you've got three holes, so you've got one hole there, and then we want one hole there, and we want one on the other side. So we see where that one is. So we've got one there, we should have one there, and we'll have one around the other side. So that all those don't line up, and ideally you want the main one to be the opposite side of the little nick in there. Right, so we'll grab this, we'll put it into the compression ring here, checking that everything's sitting nicely, put that into here. Right, and then you grab the key, and as we tighten this up, all the rings are going to be compressed and they're going to go into where they should be sitting. So we tighten that up. Right, so that should be pretty good. And then now I've already lubed up the inside of the engine here. This has already got oil in there from the Lucas oil. And then we're going to grab this part here. And sometimes it's easier to set it up. So we'll set it up today. We'll set it up like this. We're going to check which way this is going to go. So there's the flywheel, so it's going to go in that way. And just for ease, I'm going to put some oil on this for the moment. Put some oil on here. Make sure that's got oil on there. We'll put some oil on the crank when we put it in. So we're going to put it in, mark, the flywheel. So we put this onto here. I'll just grab a little micrometer. You don't need to beat the crap out of these, so you can line it up with there. And all you're going to do is just tap it down so it's sitting on there, and then we're just going to tap this bit down, and all going well, it should just go straight in. So that's now gone straight in, with the rings are now all compressed and it's sitting the right way. So that's how easy it is to put a piston in. So put these tools over to here. So now what we'll do is we'll lie this back down again. I'm going to put some oil on the crank journal. So that's got oil on the crank journal now. And then we're going to push this down a fair way until we can get it to line up with, right, I'll slide it up this way as you can see in there. So now what we've got is, this is now sitting on the crank. You can see it sitting on here. We've got oil on this stuff. We're now going to put some more oil on this one here. So looking at that, it's in pretty good condition. There's no major wear patterns on there. These don't run bearings in here. They're just a machine surface. Right, so now what we're going to do is put this on, noting that where the line is, it's going to go one way. That should now fit into there, which it does. And then we've got a couple of bolts to put in. So put some bolts in here, and a bolt in here. And you can just start them off by hand. They should be relatively clean threads in there. Right, just give my hand a little bit of a clean. It's a little bit covered in oil, makes it a bit hard to wind the bolts in. So we're going to wind the bolts in. And then once we've wound them in, we'll need to torque them up to the right torque setting. And all these motors have got different bolts sometimes, so you've got to make sure you get the right torque settings. So I'll just keep winding this in. It's a bit trickier with greasy hands, but that's right, we'll get there. So you could just get a spanner or a socket on this and wind them in as well. So we're just about there. So that one's nipped up, and this one's not far away. Okay, so that's nipped up. So it's a little bit of a move. That's moving still, so that's good. Now we need to torque it up. So I've actually got the torque specifications here. The collar rod is 16.9 Newton meters. So I've got my torque wrench here, and I'm going to set it to 16.9. Okay, so that's about there. I'll get my socket. Now that I've cleaned my toolbox out, I can find sockets a lot easier than I used to be able to, which is pretty cool. I think it's no, not that size. There it is, sitting right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to torque these bolts up. So we're going to put it in, and we're not going to torque them up straight away. We're going to just nip them up a little bit. Sometimes you've got to move it around to get it in the right place so you can get the torque wrench onto it. Okay, so that's pretty close to being right. Okay, so now I'm going to torque it. Okay, so that's that one done. I'll move it around a little bit so we can get onto it. So it gets a little bit tricky trying to get everything to fit where you need to get it onto. Okay, so that one's done, and that one's already done. Okay, so that's now torqued up to the correct torque, and as you can see, I can still move this, so it means that everything's happy. What we'll do now is we'll bring it around, and we can see that we've got this mark here, the dot on the crank. Now this dot is our alignment mark. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grab the camshaft, and again we're going to put some oil on it. Oh, actually, what we should do before we do that, we'll put the cam followers in, eh? That's a good idea. So the cam followers are the next thing to go in, and this is what the cam followers look like. There's two of those. So the push rods sit on the top of here, and these sit on the camshaft. So again, we'll put some oil on those, and then we'll put them in. Nearly forgot about those. Oil on there, lube it up. And the cam followers, they go into here and into here. Okay, so the cam followers are now in, and we've greased them all up. Then we'll grab the camshaft, which is this piece. Now this goes in that way, so we're going to put some oil on the bottom of here. Make sure we get some on there. We'll put a bit of it on the lobes as well. And you can see in this one here, this has actually got a decompression lever, which is this part here. So as you're cranking it, it actually holds the valves open a little bit so that the compression is not as high, makes it easier to start. It also means it's very hard to get a compression test on it. So usually you test the engine by doing a cylinder leakage, not by doing a compression test, okay? Put a bit of oil on here. Now we obviously need to line up the timing mark. So this one here, the timing mark is that dot on there. So we're going to put that into there. And we're going to line that dot up with that one. And there we go. So we've now timed it up, so that's perfectly timed. Happy as. Now, most important thing to do is to remember to put this part in. This is the bit that slashes the oil all around, and if you don't have it, you get no oil anywhere, and it gets slower and slower and slower until it stops. And I know that because I've done it before. So this needs to go on here. So this wheel lines up with the camshaft on there. Now we've taken the governor off, we've left everything else in there. That's what slops the oil around to get lubrication. So that just sits there for when we put the sump on top of it. All right. Also remember we've got these two pins which are holding everything together in the bottom. We've cleaned everything up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get a bit of white spirits, put a bit on the rag, and we're going to give this a wipe with some white spirits to make sure this is nice and clean. Now, some people will say you put a gasket on here. It does depend on what the end float is. Now, we tested the end float on this a little while ago, and we decided that it didn't need a gasket because the end float was pretty good without the gasket. So we've cleaned up that one. And then we're going to do the same on the other piece, this piece here. And we're going to give this a clean up with some white spirits. Okay. And we'll obviously need to lube up the other bits and pieces. So we're going to lube up in here, which goes onto there. And you can see that this rounded out piece, this what sits over where that sits. So, okay, so now we're ready to basically bolt this on. So I use this stuff here, JB Ultimate Grade. It's like a silicon-based type RTV. It's pretty good, I reckon. I'm a big fan of it. So, oh, sorry. Okay, so that's the stuff there. Big fan of that stuff. I think the JD Weld stuff's pretty good. So what I do is I just put a little bit around here. Now you don't need to go overboard with this stuff. You just need enough so that it's going to seal. If you put too much on, what can happen is that it can get big wads of it inside, and then you end up with it falling off and getting stuck in your oil galleries or anything like that. So it ends up with a bit of a mission. So I tend to just put a bit around the outside first. Once I've done that, it's that ugly piece, I'll get rid of that. And then I just go around and I just make it sure it's just a nice, even amount of silicone around. Make sure that it's sitting where it needs to be. So just make sure that it's around all the parts where it could leak. Trying not to put too much on. Alright. Now obviously you've cleaned up all these surfaces before with a flat board and some sandpaper just to make sure it's all clean, and then you wash everything down with you know, like soapy water to get rid of any extra bits you didn't want, and then it looks pretty reasonable. I don't think we're going to have too much hanging off the inside. Okay, so then what we do is both covers are clean. We're going to oil up where it goes into here. Okay, so we're going to oil up in here. So that's all covered. We're going to put oil on, grease on here, oil on there. So that's all covered. Now the other thing is we talked about before, the Vaseline. Put a bit of Vaseline on the oil ring, on the oil seal. So So let's get a little bit of this, put it on the O-ring seal around there. Okay, so now we should be able to slot this down and put it together. So we've got to find out which way it goes. So you can see the rounded bit there and the locating lug there. So all going well. Hopefully we haven't forgotten anything inside there. We'll find out later. And then we're going to put this onto here. And once it drops in, it should drop down relatively easily. Make sure that everything's lining up where it should be. What's going on? Why is it not sitting quite right? Oh, I see. We've just got that. This is not quite sitting right there. It's just the there we go. So yeah, you should never have to knock the crap out of the stuff to put it together. If it's really difficult to put together, there's something in the way and you've done something wrong. So it should just go together that easily every time. So that's now all sitting down there. Yep, it's all sitting nice and clear. Sitting nicely around all the places. So now we're going to bolt it together. So is it the right bolts? No, that's the bolts we want. So I've also cleaned up all these bolts. So they've all been cleaned up before we put them together. Alright, so we're just going to put these on here, wind them in around here, and again these need to be torqued down to the right setting. So we'll torque these down. All going well. Right, so that's pretty good to there. I'll just grab a socket and let's give these a bit of a tighten. Right, so I'll just tighten these down. I'm only just going to nip them for the moment. And once we've nipped them up, then we'll torque them up, and generally torque them up in a correct order. So I'm just going around just tightening up a little bit at this stage, and then we'll torque them up. If you're clever, you can do this. Haven't done that for a while, but that was before we had speed braces. We used to just flick it around. Great fun back in the day. Right, so now we're just going to torque them up. Right, so we've nipped those all up now, so now we're going to torque them. And the torque setting for this is 20.3 Newton meters. So what you do now is once you've nipped them up, start on one side, bring it around, and then go the opposite side, do the same thing. Okay, and then we're going to come over here, make sure you've got enough movement there, and then come to this side, and then back over to this side, and then back over to this side. So basically you want to work opposite each other as you go around. It just tightens it down more evenly. And then once you get nearly the end, then you just go around and just check they're all 100%. So that's what we haven't done. What we have, back over to this one. What's happened here? Oh, that's not good. I think we might have a problem, Houston. That's tight. That's tight. That's tight. That's tight. Okay, so it looks like this one has stripped the thread. So that's going to make life interesting because now we've got to fix it. So what we'll do is we'll undo it and just see what's going on first, whether it's the bolt or whether it's something else. It might be the block. Let's have a look. think it's actually the block. The thread has gone on it. Okay, so what we might do is we might just try another bolt, and if that doesn't work, then we're going to have to repair the thread. Bolt is stripped, so what that means, I've got to pull the engine apart now, which is a little bit sad. So we'll just undo all these bolts around here. We're going to have to put a helicoil into the block, which is a little bit of pain, but you know, it's better to find it now than when you're racing around the track and it's too late and it blows the bolt out and then all of a sudden you've got oil going everywhere and stuff. So just makes it a little bit of a longer process, that's all. So we'll pull these bolts out, put one over there, and then we're going to get this cover off again. So we'll get our softy hammer, a little bit of nut. Should come out relatively easily. Obviously the sealant's all going to go off now, so we're going to have to start again with the sealant. That's okay, that's just the way it is here. So this thread here is knackered, and I can see that now that it's just basically stripped the thread out. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to redo that thread with a different thread. Okay, so we've got the sump off. We found the thread's all damaged in there, so we need to repair the thread. So what we're going to do is use an easy out kit. Basically we're going to put a new thread in. It's going to be a metric kit because I don't have imperial ones here, so I'm going to mark the bolt with some paint so we know that it's metric. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill the hole out first. We've got the proper drill, put a bit of grease on it because we don't want to have lots of stuff going into the engine, so I put a bit of a bund there to stop it. So we're just going to try and keep this as straight as possible and just very carefully just drill in. Play ball with me. So we want to keep just cleaning this off as we go because we don't want to have a heap of stuff coming into it. So you can see we're just trying to drill that out a little bit so we can put a helicoil into it. So I'll put a bit more grease on there and we'll go a bit further. Getting there. I just don't want to, for some reason my chuck's not holding as well as it used to. A little bit more grease on there. Just about there now. Right, I think that'll do us. So I've drilled the hole. Let's get some compressed air, put my glasses on, and I just want to blow any of that stuff away. Right. So that's cleaned all that out. So now what we have to do is we have to put a thread in there, special thread. So I've got the thread, I just need to get the tack to put that in with, which is here. I must say, having my toolbox is all clean just makes life so much easier to find what's going on. Alright, so I'll put this back together again because I've just pulled it apart. Right, put this into here. Oh, that's great, it's not going to fit. And I don't have one any bigger than that, I think. Okay, so plan B now. Pretty sure I don't have another one of those. No, I don't. Well, that's a bugger. Okay, so plan B is back to the old school days. We're going to just put it in by hand. So this is not ideal, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do because that's all you've got. Right, so the idea is we're just going to try and push this in by hand, and again we're going to put a bit of grease on it to try and catch the swarf. And a bit of grease on there, and we're just going to very carefully wind this in. And this is now making a new thread into the block. So it shouldn't be too difficult to do. The aluminium. going in pretty well. And you can usually feel when you've gone down far enough, it'll either get really hard to move, and then you know you've gone far enough into the hole. Keep winding that in. If it gets really tight and really nasty, you can bring it out and unwind it and just have a check of what's going on. So I'm just going to pull it out and see how far down we are. Right. Alright, so that actually looks pretty good in there. I think that thread's gone down far enough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the old compressed air and put my glasses on again, and I'm going to give that a bit of a clean out. So you've got to watch your ears with this sort of stuff. Right, so yep, I think that's pretty good. So now what we do is we get the helicoil, and we're going to wind the helicoil in. Now what you do is you make sure you put it on the right way and you set the depth on it. So I think that's probably going to be okay. So you get the helicoil and you basically just wind it in to that thread that you've just made. Alright, so now we have a new thread in there. Okay, so then what you do is you just break off the little tang in the bottom, like that. And then I get the compressed air in there again, and I blow that little piece out. Right, it's come out, felt that come out, so that's good. And then we will remove this from in here and just see if we can see any bits in there. It all looks pretty clean to me. So what I've done is, the old bolt was this one here, okay, got a different thread on it. The new bolt is the same length, but it's got a different thread, so it's not actually the same thread, it's a metric thread. So what I'm going to do, it's got number 4 on it, so when I've finished I'll put a bit of paint on there, and you can see I'm just going to check that this goes in here now, because obviously if it doesn't go in there we've got some major problems. So all going well, we should be able to just wind that in. Hang on, I haven't quite cleaned up that thread properly, I don't think. No, I was going to clean up this thread a little bit. It's not going to quite do what it's supposed to do, so I'll give it a little bit of a clean up. Then we'll try running it down in there. Or does it not want to go down in there? What have we done? That's right. There we go. Right, so that's going in there okay. All going well. Right, okay. So that's repaired that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clean all this off again, and then we'll come back and we'll torque the block down, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so sumps back on again, all cleaned up, new bolt in there. So yes, we did torque it up, so that's actually a 12mm. So just to prove you it is actually torqued, so okay, so it is actually torqued up, not just sitting in there. So what I'm going to do is actually going to mark it with a bit of colour. You can see it's got number 4 on it, which generally gives away the fact that it's a metric bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of yellow paint in here as well. And so what it means is the owner of this motor will know that this particular bolt is actually a metric bolt, and it's got to go back in the same place again. In fact, what I might do is just put a bit of a yellow dot around the outside here as well, so that they know that that is a metric bolt. All right, okay, so what we'll do now is we'll assemble up the oil pump. Pretty easy to assemble up the oil pump. It has a little piece that goes through that keys into the camshaft, and then it comes up and keys into here. So again, we'll put some lubrication on it just to make sure that it's happy. Put it in there, and we'll line it up with the camshaft in there, which should be, you'll feel it click in, which it just did. And then what we'll do, I'll just get my glasses. Then we need to put the top part in. Again, you need to lube this up quite a lot too. So this oil pump here, it's not really a pressure pump, more just a flow pump, and it just moves the oil around through the oil filter. Okay, so we'll make sure we've got that all nicely lubed up and plenty of oil on it. It should fit into there quite well. Once we get it in the right place, it should slide down into there. There we go. And then that should sit over there, all happy like that. And always pays just to put a bit more oil in these ones just to get them to start up nicely. Okay, so the next thing to look at is the O-ring that goes in there. So the old O-ring is this one here, and it's actually been flattened. So I'm telling you lies, that's the old one, it's been flattened. You can see that's flat and that's round. So this one here, we're going to throw away. And this one here, again, we'll go for the old the Vaseline. If I can remember where I put it. Here it is. It's always good to lube up these. So you can use a proper rubber grease, that's fine, but Vaseline is pretty good for this sort of stuff. Okay, so then we sit that nicely onto there. Should sit in there pretty well, which it does. Then we need to get the housing. Okay, and I just cleaned up the housing a little bit with a bit of paper. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on here, just because I want to make sure that it's not going to catch on the first time. Alright, and then this needs to go over the 3 holes. So we'll line it up with the 3 holes, hopefully all going well. Here we go, and we need to put it together with the bolts. Now these bolts are actually star drive, so I'll just get my star drive in a second. Let's just start that one. I'm just going to go and grab my star drive. And always the last one you grab, of course. There we go. So we'll just start these off with the star drive. Tighten these down. And again, you want to do these relatively easy, so you start them off together and then just tighten them all down. Right, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so another thing just while we're here is these mounting bolts here were all damaged. So what I've done is I've grabbed one of these. So these are really cool tools. These are a drill and a tap all in one. And basically I've now tapped these out to a 10mm bolt. So standard 10 by 1.25. They're now tapped out. So all you have to do when you mount the engine is just drill your holes and then just wind your 10mm bolts up. So that makes it really easy. The other thing to remember while we're here is if we flip this over on the side, remember we put this big hole here so that we could take the governor out. So now it's time to fill that hole up. And what I did was I drilled it out and tapped a thread into it. Now I've filed it flat. We've got our bolt here somewhere, which is this bolt here. So we're going to put this bolt, we're going to bolt the bolt in there. But we do need to put some sealer on it because we don't want it to leak. So we're just going to put a bit of sealer around this. Probably more than I need, but you know, should be all right. Make sure we've got, it's good enough to seal it. And then we're just going to wind this in. All going well, we'll wind it in. Okay. Alright, and then we'll just give this a bit of a tighten up. Right, that's all tight, and there should be a sealer poking at the side, which there is. So that now should be the governor gone and the hole all filled. So the next thing you do is we'll flip it completely up the other way, because we're sort of done with that part for the moment. Flip it up, put it through here. Now you also want to check that you've got nothing binding. So now's a good time to just grab the socket on the bolt. Get the right one would be good. This one here. And you just want to check that it's easy to turn the engine over. Now look at that, nice and easy to turn it over. So that means that we've got no problems anywhere, nothing's binding up, nothing's going all funny. And there we go. So that's the most of the block done. So the next thing to do after this is we will put the head on it, put the push rods in it, and the charging and all the other bits and pieces that go onto there as well. So I think that's about it for today. It's been longer than I thought. So yeah, fixing the bolt, good learning curve there. Able to helicoil it, so you can see how easy it is to fix. So until next time, Business Garage.